What's up, YouTube? I am WonderHeart, and welcome to my channel of inner and outer expansion. Last year, I made some pretty crazy realizations while on acid, LSD, and today we're going to be talking about LSD, the loops, and the time I got stuck in a super loop. Alright? So this all goes back to February of 2018. I was with a few friends and we decided we were gonna trip on some LSD. They hit me up and they're like, yo, we got some extra, come through. And I hadn't really ever experienced LSD. Possibly when I was younger, about 18, but I don't know if it was LSD or if it was mescaline or what it was. And it was a completely different experience than this time. I was older this time and looking more of a spiritual experience, and that is what we got. Now, a couple things happened in that experience. Everything from getting like unspoken wisdom, basically, throughout the night we were like channeling this like wisdom and knowledge that was just like unspoken. It was just coming like from somewhere, almost like downloads like crazy. I remember coming to the realization, we all just kept talking about like words, like what's the purpose of words, and like through that realization I finally came to understand like that our words really don't have too much bearing. It's more the intention behind the word. The word itself is like just noise, it's like vibration, but the intention behind that vibration is really where the message comes from. And I thought that was really interesting, so I figured I'd share that with you real quick. But in reference to the loops, okay? Now, I ended up labeling LSD as Lucy the Loop God after this experience. And I really like that. So I remember at a certain point throughout the night, like we were all kind of going through like these like patterns of conversations and whatnot. Like we would like repeat the same type of stuff. I remember one of our buddies, he actually kept getting stuck in this one loop throughout the whole night where he would apologize, just randomly just say, I'm sorry. And he wouldn't do anything wrong. There was really no reason for him to say, I'm sorry. But like out of nowhere, it would just be like, I'm sorry, and he would just keep like repeating that. I realized like, man, like what is going on here, and like I realized like, yo dude, you're like stuck in a loop, man. Like you keep like going through the same thing and like the same emotions and like feeling sorry for some reason. Like why are you doing that? And he wouldn't have an answer for it, and then he would be like, it's okay, I'm sorry, and he like apologized for saying I'm sorry, and it was like interesting. And that was like one of the moments I kind of realized it. I also realized for myself, I would kind of get stuck in these loops of like, we would be in a conversation and all of a sudden I would find myself going back to the same spot in this house, and like it was like something I wasn't even in control of. I would just do it, and the whole night just kind of kept going on like that. It was really interesting. And through this experience of LSD and all these loops, and basically they were just like these like almost like subconscious patterns happening that I wasn't in control of. I started thinking, like, is this LSD doing this, or like what's going on really? Now, fast forward after this trip, a week later, maybe a few days later, I don't even know, I kept reflecting back on like all of these loops we kept getting stuck in. And I just remember like thinking like, okay, like was it Lucy the Loop God? Like, was the LSD causing the loops, or was LSD bringing my awareness to these loops that are happening at all times, not just when on LSD? Maybe it was the LSD and the heightened awareness was allowing me to see these loops play out, okay? And I started to think about that, and then I started to kind of like pay attention to like, what we do in our regular day life, and I realized that that's exactly what it was. Like, we have these like subconscious patterns, these subconscious loops that we're basically like set on, these habits and whatnot, whether they be physical, emotional, psychological, whatever, but we do these things that pattern out, they loop out and kind of just go on forever until we like become aware of those loops, those subconscious patterns, and then we're able to like figure out where that stems from and then kind of like correct it, so we're not stuck in that that habit of looping out in that manner. All right, I know that's kind of like vague and whatnot, but let me try to think of an example. So somebody that smokes cigarettes, they don't necessarily consciously decide they want to smoke a cigarette, right? It's kind of like a loop. It's a pattern that plays out from their subconscious mind and that they just instantly are triggered to do. So like they eat food and then instantly it's like they smoke a cigarette afterwards. And I say this because I used to smoke. You hop in a vehicle and you start driving and you start smoking a cigarette. And it's just this like pattern that just plays out subconsciously because your subconscious mind has created this like pattern. It's like imprinted this into your mind that this is what you do in this moment based off of the reaction from X event. Now Y event happens, right? X event meaning, you just ate food. Y event, time to smoke a cigarette. All right. And that's like a real simple explanation on kind of how it works. But I realized that this was like on a subconscious level. And on a deeper level, I started realizing that it has to do with, something in your subconscious that maybe goes back to like something in the past that you have to heal. Like for example, my buddy, and how he kept saying, I'm sorry. He was on like this loop feedback of like apologizing for things. And he had absolutely no reason to apologize, but his subconscious mind has had that happening, I would imagine, probably for a very long time. I think it would be safe to assume that maybe something in his life has caused him to feel maybe that he has to apologize for something, right? And now that just plays out in his life and he just keeps saying, I'm sorry. He's apologizing for something in the moment, even though really it stems all the way back to maybe a childhood event that he's really apologizing for. And maybe he's not aware of it, and that's why the subconscious mind just kind of plays that out, all right? And it's just really quite interesting. The subconscious mind is something that I'm really fascinated with, and I'm starting to study more into it, and it just really, really amazes me. They say the subconscious mind actually kind of creates like 95% of your reality. Like you're not really consciously aware of most of what you're doing. Most of it's coming from this like subconscious level, and it then just plays out. And once you're able to go deep into the subconscious mind and correct those patterns, you're able to then consciously be able to fix that, and maybe not fix it, but like replace it with something else, because a lot of these behaviors, these patterns, these loops that we are stuck on repeating are a lot of times maybe like, I hate saying the word negative, but they don't really serve us, right? And it could be just this like this energy that's been like suppressed and forced inwards, and now that energy, since it hasn't released, it just keeps like playing out in our lives in some way, shape, or form. On a deeper level, you can look at like my previous relationship, for example. Like I had abandonment issues growing up because I felt as though my father had left us. After my parents got divorced, he was on and off of drugs for a long time, and he wasn't really into my life in maybe the way that I expected a father to be, and I didn't get the love I expected I should receive. And because of that, subconsciously, I suppressed that emotion. And then throughout my life, I would then manifest that pattern into my life because I felt like I felt like I was going to be abandoned, and B, I felt like I wasn't worthy of love. So then my subconscious mind would go out and, like I got into a very long relationship, but I would do things subconsciously to push her away because I didn't feel I deserved her love. I cheated on her. I would go out and do all this partying and stuff without her. And like, you know, there was a lot of times where she just kind of felt alone and I wasn't there. So I was like pushing her away because I didn't feel I was worthy of her love. And then, you know, eventually we ended up breaking up. She broke up with me, and you know, I ended up getting abandoned essentially, right? And that was kind of like this subconscious pattern that was playing out all the way from my childhood. And I was just literally subconsciously like creating that reality in a sense. But yeah, so that's like really, really interesting, and kind of my perception of, I guess, what these loops really mean, and that it really is tied to the subconscious mind. Now, granted, I think when you're on LSD, the reason you become so aware of them is I think it has something to do with like a short-term memory loss. You're not able to like cognitively like see that whole. So like it just keeps like getting you stuck in this like time loop, and it just like keeps like repeating over and over again because maybe like you're not able to like fully grasp the whole there, you know? Really wild, you know what I mean? But very interesting stuff, and it totally helped me out a lot on my journey, starting to like dive deeper into the subconscious mind. It kind of brought some things up that made me be aware of those things. Now, there was another moment I did LSD, I don't know, at some point last year, and I took a lot more. Me and my buddy, we started taking a couple hits at like 1 in the morning. A couple hours went by, nothing really had happened, you know, and we kept taking more and more. And eventually about 5 a.m., maybe 6 a.m., I don't remember, it was early in the morning, I was probably like 8 hits in, maybe more, like it was a lot, and it finally hit us. And I remember we decided we were gonna go outside, and we went out front, and I'll tell you this story. This was like a really, really cool experience that was quite interesting and really magical. I remember walking out and just everything was vibrating. Like my vibration was so high, I was able to see everything from the trees to the houses to literally the air was just like this. And it was like buzzing. It was like bzzz, and it was like wild, man. I remember then like laying down on the grass and looking up in the sky and mushroom. Anyways, Lily wants to play. So I remember laying down in the sky, looking up at the sky, and I would be watching these birds fly over, okay? And like every time a bird would fly over, through like behind the bird, like the sky would like rip open, like basically like a portal would like open up, and I would see like Earth's energy grid, like basically like Earth's consciousness grid. And I would see the energy lines and everything, and then the bird would fly, and then it would like suck up and close, and then I'd look over here and see another bird, and then that one would like allow me to see through to the, you know, essentially like the heavens or whatever you want to call it, and it would just like rip open, and I'd see like another like portal with the Earth's consciousness grid, and it just kept happening. So I was like eventually like, whoa, like I'm literally seeing like Earth's consciousness grid all over the place. And it's kind of funny how this happened, because like a couple weeks before, I had actually seen my own consciousness grid, my own Merkaba, whatever you want to call it, maybe Christ consciousness. You know, I was connected to that. I'll make another video about that maybe. I was completely sober for that experience, really mind-boggling. But it was as if though I had then like gotten to this heightened state of awareness and was able to see Earth's consciousness grid. All right, so that was a really cool experience. But then afterwards, we went back inside. We were gonna smoke some weed real quick, and then we were gonna go on a walk. All right, and this is when I got stuck in a super loop. Now again, my belief about loops, it has to do with a subconscious pattern that plays out. And for myself, I have been smoking weed since I was 15 years old for a very long time. And it kind of became almost a subconscious thing that I would do. You know, anytime I would feel like I was, you know, sad, I was, you know, angry, I was hungry, I was stressed out, whatever it was, subconsciously, it was like, oh, smoke some weed, it's all right, you'll be better. And then that was just kind of how it worked. Sometimes it wouldn't even be like that. Sometimes it's just like, oh, I get home, and the first thing I do when I get home is I smoke a bowl. You know, you wake up, you smoke a bowl, and it's just like these like loops, these patterns that play out with marijuana sometimes, depending on your relationship with the medicine, okay? I'm not saying everybody has the same relationship, but for myself, I had a relationship that wasn't really serving my highest self. It was kind of serving my lowest self in that temporary moment, which is okay because maybe I wasn't ready to face some of those things. Maybe I wasn't ready for the true healing to begin. So smoking marijuana was able to help. But anywho, so back to the super loop. So this is what happened. Really, really, really wild experience. It was like almost, I couldn't believe what was happening. Lily, what are you doing? I couldn't believe what was happening in the moment, but so we go to smoke a bowl, and I remember loading the bowl. I remember me and my buddy having a conversation, and after, I don't know, it didn't feel like it was that long. Like, I remember smoking one bowl, I remember having one conversation, but come to find out after the fact, like, we actually smoked all of my weed. I kept wanting to load more weed, so again, this subconscious pattern of me wanting to smoke. Like, we wanted to go on this walk, but I, for some reason, felt like I had to smoke before we went on this walk, right? So I'm smoking this one bowl, and eventually my buddy looks at me, and he gives me this weird look in my eyes, and in that moment, like, I don't remember him even saying anything, but I remember him just looking at me. And I remember, like, me realizing, like, whoa, dude, you're stuck in a loop. And right when I had that thought and I realized it, like, I remember, like, I had the bowl, like, up to my mouth or something. And time literally went backwards. Like, that's how, like, big of a super loop I was in. Like, time went backwards. Normally, like, you just kind of loop, but you don't really see it go backwards. And I remember the bowl was in my mouth, and it just like, ooh, and the bowl like leaves and goes like back down as if like I had grabbed it and brought it up, but this time it like went back down and it hit the table. And me and my buddy's conversation, the words we had just said all spiraled backwards, and instead of like how we're talking right now, I was like, and it was so crazy. And like, literally time went backwards and stopped. And then in that moment, boom, all of a sudden, I was halfway down the street. I had only shorts on, no shoes, no shirt. It was like 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And I am now halfway down my street looking at the ground like, what just happened? Where am I at? And I'm like looking around like, how did I get here? And I look down the street at the house, and my buddy's like, bro, come on, like, hurry up, come on, come on. And I'm like, dude, this is weird. I don't know what just happened. So of course I start running back to the house, and I'm like, dude, what just happened, bro? Like, I have no clue. I was telling him like time spun backwards. Like, all of a sudden, poof, I was gone. Like, only thing I could think is like, bro, you teleported. And I wish that was true. That would have been way cooler. Obviously, the story is quite interesting regardless, but I did not teleport, unfortunately. No superpowers came about for teleportation. But my buddy goes ahead and he's like, bro, do you really want to hear what you just did? What really just happened? And I was like, hit me, dog. And essentially he says, dude, you got stuck in this loop. You kept looping out. And finally you snapped out of it, and there was like this crazy amount of energy burst. Like, you just bursted, and like you took off running out the door, and you were just screaming like a madman, essentially, like, the loops, the loops, the loops, they're everywhere, the loops, they're everywhere, as I'm like running down the street, okay? Now, kids, this is why LSD sometimes is probably not a good idea, right? It can definitely, cause some problems, and, I've heard some people get stuck in these loops forever. And I do not, condone anybody doing this, that's totally on you, but this is not me like telling you should try this, so don't take any of this as advice or like I'm trying to tell you to. But what I'm just sharing my experience of when I did this. Just remember that this is not legal, especially in the US, so be safe, and yeah. But yeah, so that's what happened to me is like I ran down this freaking street, dude, and I was just like, apparently like the loops are everywhere. And I snapped, back to reality essentially. But through that, because, my awareness of like these loops are a subconscious pattern, it was in that moment I realized like, whoa, dude, like you really have this negative relationship with marijuana that's no longer serving you, and your subconscious mind is creating this pattern with it. So it was in that moment I realized like I had an issue with marijuana that I needed to work on and work through. And I had set the intention that I was going to put it down, and of course I did not for a while. Like everything, sometimes you try to and then you pick it back up. Like I think I quit smoking at a certain point for like maybe a week, and then I would start again, which is a-okay. Like don't judge yourself if you're ever going through stuff like that and you're trying to put something down that doesn't serve you. The last thing you need to do is judge yourself if you pick it back up, because again, you got to realize that these are patterns that have been going on in your life for a very, very long time. So to try to like create a new pattern is not necessarily going to be like the quickest thing. There's a lot of old energy that's like stored in there that you have to work through. So so that's what I realized. And actually now looking at my life right now, like I am no longer smoking marijuana right now. I put it down probably 2 months ago, and I've had so much more clarity in my thoughts, and I'm no longer using it to avoid myself, avoid my emotions, avoid past pains and traumas, avoid just the things in life that we don't like, and try to use that as a coping mechanism. I'm no longer doing that. So now I'm able to work through those things on a more healthy, in a more healthy way. So yeah, that's my experience with LSD, the loops, and the super loop I got stuck in. If any of you have any experiences that you'd like to share, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear if there's anything that maybe you can relate to, or if you just want to share a crazy experience that you've had, like I'd love to hear about it. And yeah, also if you have, if you want to have a discussion about the subconscious aspect of the loops, and maybe you've never thought about it like that, like let's have a discussion about that in the comments. But it's really interesting stuff, man. And I hope that maybe this video has enlightened you on maybe some stuff that you weren't aware of. And if not, hopefully you just had fun listening to this wild story. But I appreciate y'all so much. Thank you for coming to my channel and checking it out. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. And until next time, peace.